The envelope was still in my jacket pocket when I pulled into my son's driveway in Greenwich that Saturday afternoon. I could feel the corner of it pressing against my chest every time I leaned forward. Inside that envelope was a letter from a law firm in Bar Harbor, Maine, telling me my older brother Whit had left me something I still couldn't wrap my head around. A working lobster wharf on the coast, a summer compound on Mount Desert Island with 7 bedrooms, and a portfolio of municipal bonds and Berkshire shares that the attorney, a man named Crowder, had estimated at just over $4.1 million. $4.1 million. I'm 63 years old. I spent 38 years as a structural engineer at a mid-sized firm outside Hartford, drawing bridges and parking garages and the occasional hospital wing. I drove a 2014 Camry with a coffee stain on the passenger seat that I'd given up on cleaning. My wife Marjorie had been gone 4 years that November, breast cancer, and I'd been quietly drowning in the silence ever since. I had not told a soul about the inheritance. Not my brother-in-law in Tucson. Not my old college roommate. Not even the woman at the post office who waved at me every Tuesday. The first person I wanted to tell was my daughter Holly. Holly was 34, married 6 years to a man named Brock Tessero, and they had a little boy named Wesson who was almost 3. They lived in a 4-bedroom colonial in Greenwich that Brock liked to remind people was worth $1.8 million, though I happened to know the mortgage on it was crushing him slowly. Holly worked part-time at a children's boutique. Brock was something at a hedge fund that I had never fully understood, in spite of him explaining it to me at 3 separate Thanksgivings. I parked behind Brock's lease, a black Range Rover with a dent in the rear bumper he'd been promising to fix for over a year, and I sat there for a minute with my hand on the envelope. I was going to do something stupid that day, and I knew it even then. I was going to walk in there and tell my daughter what had happened. I was going to watch her face light up. I was going to tell her she'd never have to worry about Wesson's college, or the house, or anything. I had this whole picture of it. Her crying. Me crying, Brock probably crying too, and I'd let myself feel a little warmer toward him because of it. The afternoon was that crisp early October light that makes Connecticut look like a postcard somebody mailed you from your own childhood. There were pumpkins on the front step. Wesson's plastic tricycle was tipped over on the lawn. I picked it up out of habit, set it on the porch, and that was when I heard them. The kitchen window was cracked open. Brock was on the back deck. I could see the back of his head over the railing, and Hallie was inside at the kitchen sink. They were arguing, but in that low married people voice that's worse than yelling because it means it's been going on a while. I stopped on the path. I don't know why. Maybe a part of me already knew. He's not going to give us anything, Brock. I keep telling you, he doesn't have anything. He has the house. Dad's house is worth, what, $400,000? In this market? After commissions, you're looking at $350. That's $350 more than we have right now, Holly. There was a pause. Water ran in the sink. Then Holly, my Holly, said something I'm going to carry with me for the rest of my life. I'm working on it. I told you. We just need him to move in with us. We get him out of that house. List it. Put him in the in-law suite. He's got nothing else to do. He sits there all day with Mom's pictures. He'd probably be grateful. And the Social Security. And the Social Security, yeah. And when do we do this? I'm trying to ease him into it. I told him last month the stairs are getting bad for him. Did you see him on the stairs at Easter? He's slowing down, Brock. He really is. We just have to be patient. I'd carried a 50-pound rebar bundle up a ladder in August. I was not slowing down on any stairs. I stood on that path with the tricycle in my hand and the envelope in my pocket, and I felt something inside me go very quiet. Not angry. Not yet, just quiet, the way a room gets quiet when the furnace finally cuts off, and you realize how loud it had been the whole time. Brock laughed. It wasn't a real laugh. It was the laugh he does at networking events. What if he won't move? He will. He's lonely, Brock. He's so lonely it makes me sick. I bring up Mom and he loses it. I just keep doing that until he's ready, and once he's here, we have power of attorney by Christmas. Easy. Power of attorney. For his own good. He's getting forgetful. You saw him at the 4th of July with Wesson's name. I had not gotten Wesson's name wrong on the 4th of July. I had called him Buddy. Hallie had decided that was a sign. I want to be honest with you. I almost walked back to the Camry right then. I almost just drove home and never came back. It is a version of this story where that's what I do, and I sit in my house in West Hartford for the next 20 years, pretending I'd never heard any of it, and I'd die with that envelope still in the drawer. But I had Whit's voice in my head suddenly. My brother, he'd been dead 3 weeks, and his voice was clear as if he were standing next to me. Whit used to say, "You let people show you who they are, and then you believe them, and then you act accordingly." He said it about a contractor who'd ripped him off in 1987. He said it about our father. He said it about a woman he'd almost married. So I straightened up, I put the tricycle down, I took the envelope out of my pocket, and I tucked it into the glove compartment of the Camry. And then I walked up to the front door, and I knocked like I'd just gotten there. Hallie opened the door with that smile she has, the one I used to think was just for me. She still had the dish towel in her hand. "Dad, you're early. Traffic was light. Come in. Come in. Brock's on the deck. Wesson's napping. I made that lemon thing you like." I have never liked the lemon thing. I sat at the kitchen island and I let her bring me iced tea and I listened to her tell me about Wesson's preschool and about a fundraiser for the boutique and about how Brock's bonus might come in lower this year because of the rates, and I nodded and I smiled and I asked the right questions. I've been a structural engineer for 38 years. I know how to keep my face still when something underneath it is bending. Brock came in from the deck. He shook my hand the way he always does, with that little extra squeeze that he probably learned at a seminar. He sat down across from me. He told me about a property in Vermont they were thinking about. He told me about Wesson's swim lessons. And then Hallie, sweet Hallie, with her hair pulled back the way her mother used to wear it, leaned across the island and put her hand on mine. "Daddy, we've actually been wanting to talk to you about something." Here it came. "We've been worried about you in that house. By yourself." "I'm fine, sweetheart. It's just so big for one person. And those stairs, the stairs are fine. Brock and I were thinking, what if you came and stayed with us for a while? Just to see. We've got that whole in-law suite just sitting there. Wesson would love it. You'd love it. And we could really, look after each other." She had tears in her eyes when she said it. Real ones, I think. That was the part that almost broke me. "That's very kind of you, sweetheart. Let me think about it." "There's nothing to think about, really. We just want you close." "I know you do." I drove home that evening with my hands at 10 and 2 on the wheel, and I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I drove right past my exit and ended up at a diner outside Meriden, where I sat for 2 hours with a piece of pie I didn't eat. I just sat there. And by the time the waitress came around for the 3rd time, I had decided what I was going to do. I was going to let them do it. I was going to let them show me, all the way, who they were. And then I was going to act accordingly. I called Hallie on Monday morning. I told her I'd been thinking about what she'd said. I told her she was right. The house was too big. The memories were heavy. I was lonely. I let my voice catch a little when I said her mother's name. I heard her cover the phone and tell Brock something. I heard him say yes, the way a man says it when he's just won a hand of cards. I said I'd come for a long visit first. A month, maybe 2. See how it went. She said that was perfect. I packed a single suitcase. I left the rest of the house exactly as it was. The cat went to my neighbor Lou. I told Lou I'd be back when I'd be back. And Lou, who is 76 and retired Navy chief, looked at me a long moment and said, "Whatever it is, give 'em hell." I didn't tell him what it was. I didn't need to. Before I drove down to Greenwich, I made 2 stops. The first was at Crowder's office in Bar Harbor. I didn't fly. I drove the whole 13 hours up the coast because I needed the time to think. Crowder was a small man with white hair and a handshake like a steel cable. He'd known my brother for 30 years. I told him what I'd overheard. I told him what I planned to do. He listened without interrupting, and when I was done, he opened a drawer and took out a yellow legal pad, and we got to work. We restructured everything. The wharf, the compound, the bonds, the Berkshire. We put it all into an irrevocable trust with provisions I won't bore you with, but the short version is this. Nobody could touch a dime of it without my signature, and Crowder's countersignature. Nobody. Not under power of attorney. Not under conservatorship. Not if I was declared incompetent. Not if I was dead. The trust had successor beneficiaries I named that afternoon, and Hallie was not among them. Neither was Brock. The successor beneficiaries were three: a scholarship fund at the engineering school I'd attended, a marine research station in Maine that Witt had loved, and Wesson, and a trust that would not vest until he was 35, with provisions that would prevent his parents from ever directing a single penny of it before then. I signed it on a Tuesday afternoon in October with rain on the window and Crowder's old lab snoring under the desk. The second stop was at a private investigator's office in Stamford. A woman named Doreen Halpine, who'd been recommended by my old attorney back home. I told her what I needed. She quoted me a number. I paid her in full up front. She said she'd have a preliminary report in 3 weeks. Then I drove to Greenwich, and I rang the doorbell. Hallie hugged me so hard I almost forgot what I was doing there. Wesson came running on his little legs and wrapped himself around my knees and called me. Pop the way he'd just started doing that summer, and for a minute I had to look at the ceiling. Brock clapped me on the shoulder and said, "Welcome home," and I almost knocked his teeth in right there on the threshold. I did not. I smiled. I followed Halla to the in-law suite. I unpacked my one suitcase into a dresser that smelled like cedar. I told her it was perfect. For the first 2 weeks I played the part. I let Halla bring me coffee in the morning. I let her ask me how I'd slept in that gentle voice that I now understood was a tool, and I told her I'd slept fine. I read to Wesson. I taught him how to use a hammer with a piece of cork and some thumbtacks, which Halla did not like. But I held my ground on that one because a boy needs to learn how to use his hands. I went on 3 separate outings with Hallie to look at brochures for active senior communities in the area. I asked thoughtful questions. I let her brochure splain me into a kind of agreeable fog. I let Brock take me to dinner one Friday at a steakhouse where the menu didn't have prices on it. He ordered a 40-day dry-aged ribeye and a bottle of Cabernet that I'd later confirmed was $340. He told me about a private opportunity he was looking at, a real estate fund, capital call structure, very limited spots, and how he was looking for trusted partners. He said the minimum was $250,000. He said it the way a man says it when he thinks he is being subtle. I told him I'd think about it. I told him my house in West Hartford was probably worth more than I'd thought. I let my eyes get a little misty. I said something about how good it was that we were finally getting close. He paid the bill with his Amex, and I watched his hand shake a little when he signed. Hallie started bringing up power of attorney in week 3. She did it the way she'd done everything else. Soft, concerned. Just for emergencies, Dad. Just in case. She'd printed out forms. 2 sets. One from a website that was, I later checked, not of legitimate legal service, and one that looked more official but was made out to Brock, not her. I asked why Brock and not her. She said, "Well, he handles the paperwork in the family, and I'm so scatterbrained you know me, Dad." I laughed and said, "Yes, that's true. You've always been so scatterbrained, my sweet girl." I did not sign the forms. I told her I'd had my old lawyer look them over. She got a little tight around the mouth at that. She said, "Oh, you didn't have to do that, Dad. That's expensive." I said, "He owed me a favor, didn't cost a thing." She nodded and put the forms in a kitchen drawer and didn't bring them up again for 10 days. In the meantime, Doreen's first report arrived. I read it sitting on the bed in the in-law suite with the door locked. Brock had been let go from the hedge fund 11 months earlier. He had not told my daughter. He had been driving into Manhattan 4 days a week to a WeWork on Park Avenue, where he played online poker and managed a personal portfolio that had lost approximately $612,000 over the prior 2 years. The Range Rover was 3 payments behind. The Greenwich house had been refinanced twice. They were currently 4 months behind on the mortgage, and the bank had begun what Doreen's report called pre-foreclosure outreach. There was more. Brock had a girlfriend. A woman in Stamford, 31 years old, worked at a yoga studio. He saw her on Tuesdays and Thursdays. The swim lessons he sometimes took Wesson to were also Tuesday afternoons, and the girlfriend often came along. There were photographs of her holding my grandson at a playground in Stamford. Holding him. I made it to the bathroom before I was sick. The second report came a week later. Hallie didn't know about the girlfriend. Hallie did know about the job. She'd known for 6 months. They had a joint Google Doc. Doreen had managed to obtain a screenshot in which they kept a running list of options for staying afloat. Item 3 on the list, in my daughter's handwriting, was Dad. House. Eventual assets. Item 4 was Ask Aunt Cordy with 3 question marks. Aunt Cordy was my late wife's sister in Tucson, who lived on disability. I sat with those reports for 2 days. I didn't eat much. Hallie asked if I was coming down with something, and I said maybe a little touch of something, and she made me chicken soup from a can and brought it to the suite on a tray, and I thanked her, and I ate it, and I cried after she left, and I'm not embarrassed to tell you that. Then I cried after she left, and I'm not embarrassed to tell you that. Then I called Crowder. I told him everything. He listened, and at the end he said, "Are you ready for the next part?" And I said yes, I was. The next part started with Thanksgiving. I told him I wanted to host. Not at my house in West Hartford. That was too small. I wanted to do something special. I'd been looking at a place. A private dining room at the Saybrook. I'd already put down the deposit. I wanted to invite a few people. Brock's parents. Hallie's aunt from Tucson. I'd pay for her flight. My old neighbor Lou. And a couple of friends from up in Maine. Hallie was confused. Friends from Maine, Dad? Since when? Old friends of your Uncle Witz. Since the funeral. We've stayed in touch. She let it go. She was excited about the venue. She started planning what to wear. She told Brock at dinner, and I watched his eyes light up because a private room at the Saybrook meant somebody was spending money on this Thanksgiving, and that somebody, in his mind, was me. I told them at one point casually that I'd been thinking about my will, that I wanted to make some announcements at dinner. Brock dropped his fork. Hallie covered his hand on the table, and I saw her squeeze it twice. In the meantime, I had one more piece of business. I called my niece, my brother Witt's daughter, Marisol. She was 40, lived in Portland, Maine, worked as a marine biologist at the research station I'd named in the trust. She had not known her father had left anything substantial. He'd been estranged from her mother for 20 years. I told her about the inheritance, the trust, the research station provision. She cried on the phone for 10 straight minutes. Then she pulled herself together and asked what she could do. I told her I needed her to come to Thanksgiving. I told her why. She said she'd be there. I also called my old college roommate, a retired federal prosecutor named Avon Truss, who lived in New Haven and who'd been at my wedding in 1986. I told him what I was planning. He said he wanted to be there too. He said he had not had this much fun in years. He brought a friend, another retired attorney, a woman named Callista Brennaway who specialized in elder abuse cases in Connecticut. She offered to come at no charge. I told her I'd buy her dinner. She said deal. The day before Thanksgiving, I made one more change to the trust. I added a small provision. A residence right for myself, for life, at the Mount Desert Island compound. I'd been thinking about it. The Greenwich house was not going to be my home much longer. Neither was West Hartford. I was going to go to Maine. Thanksgiving Day was clear and cold, and the kind of New England day where the light feels like it's coming up from the ground as much as down from the sky. I wore a tie my wife had bought me for our 30th anniversary. I'd kept it in tissue paper for 4 years. It felt right that day. The private room at the Saybrook had a long table that seated 14. There were small floral arrangements that Hallie had personally selected. There were name cards she had handwritten the night before, her tongue between her teeth the way she'd done since she was 8 years old. I had watched her do it from the doorway, and I had to leave the room. Brock's parents arrived first. Pleasant people. His mother gave me a hug. I felt sorry for them. Hallie's Aunt Cordy came in next, having flown in the night before. She'd been crying on and off all morning because she didn't know why she'd been invited and was so grateful. Lou came in a suit I didn't know he owned. Marisol arrived with a small leather portfolio under her arm that I had asked her to bring. Avon came with Callista, both of whom I introduced as old family friends. Crowder flew down from Bar Harbor and sat at the far end of the table, looking like exactly what he was, which was a country lawyer with a steel handshake. We ate. We laughed. Wesson sat next to me in a high chair, and I cut his turkey into tiny pieces. When the plates were cleared, I stood up. Hallie was glowing. Brock had drunk 3 glasses of wine and his face was a little red. He had his phone in his lap. I had seen him look at it twice during dinner. I thanked everyone for coming. I talked about my wife. I cried a little when I said Marjorie's name, and I meant every tear. I talked about my brother Whit and about the things he taught me. I talked about family. I talked about the kind of love that shows up and the kind that doesn't. Hallie nodded along, beaming, certain that this was the moment she'd been steering me toward for 2 months. Then I said, "Some of you don't know, my brother Whit passed in September. He left me a small inheritance. I've spent the last 2 months thinking very carefully about what to do with it." Hallie's smile got just slightly wider. "It's about $4.1 million. The room went quiet. Brock made a sound. I'm not sure what kind. Hallie's mouth opened a little. My friend Crowder here is the attorney who handled my brother's estate. He's going to walk us through what's been done with it. Crowder stood up. He spoke for about 6 minutes. He explained the trust. He explained that nothing in it could be reached by anyone other than myself during my lifetime. He explained the beneficiaries, the engineering school, the Marine Research Station, at which point I gestured to Marisol, who stood briefly and nodded, and Wesson, in a vested trust, untouchable until his 35th birthday, with a court-appointed trustee, not his parents. Hallie's face had gone the color of paper. Brock said very softly, "What?" I sat down. I let it sit there a minute. I sipped my water. Then I said, "Hallie, Brock, I'd like to talk to you about something else, in front of everyone here." Hallie started to stand up. "Dad, maybe we should sit down, sweetheart." She sat. I told them what I had heard 2 months earlier, standing on the path with the tricycle in my hand. I quoted my daughter back to her word for word, because I had written it down in the car that night and read it every morning for 63 mornings. I told her she had said she wanted me to live with her so she could get power of attorney by Christmas. I told her she had described me as forgetful when I was not. I told her she had called her mother's grief a tool. Hallie started shaking her head. Brock said, "This is crazy. I'm not done, Brock." I took out a folder. Dorian's reports and summary. I told him I knew he'd been fired 11 months earlier. I told him I knew about the WeWork. I told him I knew about the poker losses. I told him I knew about the woman in Stamford. I told him I knew she had held my grandson at a playground. Hallie's face changed when I said that. It changed in a way I had not prepared for. She had not known about the woman. She had known about the job and the money. She had not known about the woman or my grandson. She turned to Brock and she said, "What?" Brock said nothing. She said it again, louder. "What?" Brock. Callista Brennaway leaned forward in her chair and slid a card across the table to Hallie. She said, "Whenever you're ready, sweetheart, we can talk." Brock stood up. He looked at me. He said, "You son of a..." Avon, who had not said much all night, said, "Sit down, son. You really, really want to sit down." Brock sat down. I looked at my daughter. She was crying. Real tears this time. Not the kind from the kitchen island. I said, "Hallie, I love you." I've loved you every single day since the day you were born. I am not going to live with you. I am not signing any power of attorney. I am not putting my house on the market. I am going to Maine. I would like to see Wesson. I would like to be his grandfather. But I will not be your bank, and I will not be your fool, and I will not pretend I didn't hear what I heard. Do you understand me? She nodded. She couldn't talk. I said, if you want a relationship with me, real one, where you call me on a Sunday and you don't ask for anything, ever, then we have a path. It starts today. If you don't, I understand. I'll always love you, but I'll love you from Maine. Brock said, Hallie, get up, we're leaving. She looked at him. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked at me. Then she looked at me. Then she looked at Callista's card on the table. And she picked the card up, and she put it in her purse, and she said, Brock, get your own ride home. I have thought about that moment many times since. The moment she picked up the card, I don't know what would have happened if she hadn't. I don't know what I would have done. I think I would have driven to Maine anyway. I think I would have grieved her like a death, but she picked up the card. It's been 6 months now. I'm writing this from the porch of the compound on Mount Desert Island. The water is gray today, and there are 2 lobster boats out past the point. The wharf is doing about what it was doing when Whit was alive, which is to say, it's not making anybody rich, but it's keeping a dozen families fed, and that feels like enough. Hallie filed for divorce in January. Brock contested it badly, then ran out of money for lawyers, and the whole thing settled in April. The Greenwich house went into foreclosure. The girlfriend in Stamford left him in February, when his Amex got declined. Last I heard, he was living with his parents. Hallie and Wesson are with me now. They came up in May. She's working at a bookstore in Bar Harbor and going to AA, which surprised me, but apparently the drinking had gotten worse than I'd known. She is not the daughter I had 2 months ago, in the kitchen with the dish towel. She is somebody quieter and somebody more honest, and somebody who looks me in the eye now when she says good morning, which she did not used to do. We haven't talked much about the kitchen. We're going to. Callista says we should, when we're ready. We're not ready. But we will be. Wesson is on the porch with me right now, drawing on a piece of paper with a crayon that's mostly broken. He's drawing a lobster boat. It looks more like a shoe, but I told him it was the best lobster boat I had ever seen. He's 3.5. He calls me Pop. He has no idea that anything bad ever happened, and if I have anything to say about it, he never will. Marisol comes over for dinner on Sundays. The research station hired 2 new postdocs with the trust money this spring, and they're doing work on lobster populations that even I, an old structural engineer, find interesting. Crowder still calls on the 1st of every month to check in. Lou writes me letters in his big crabbed handwriting from West Hartford. The cat is happy. I keep my brother's photograph on the desk in the study, the one from his 60th birthday, where he's holding a striper he caught off the rocks and grinning like a teenager. I talk to him sometimes. I tell him what I told you, that he was right, that you let people show you who they are and you believe them, and you act accordingly. But I'd add one thing now, that I don't think Whit ever quite got to. Sometimes, after you've acted accordingly, some of those people come back. Not all of them, maybe not most of them, but some. And when they do, with no agenda and no ask, and just their own broken self in their hands, you have to be ready. You have to have left a door open somewhere, even a small one, even if you don't tell them where it is, because that's what family is, in the end, not the ones who deserve you, the ones who come back, and the door you left open without knowing you'd left it. The water's getting choppy. I should bring Wesson inside. Hallie's making chowder tonight, and I'm told there's pie. I'm a lucky old man. I think about that path a lot. The tricycle on the lawn, the envelope in my pocket, the way the kitchen window was cracked open just enough. If I had walked in 2 minutes later, I would have signed those papers by Christmas. I would have moved into the in-law suite. I would have handed Brock my checkbook, and I would have called it love. That's the part that still keeps me up some nights, not what Holly did. What I almost let her do, because I wanted so badly to believe she was still the little girl who fell asleep on my chest during thunderstorms. My brother Whit used to say that you let people show you who they are, and then you believe them. I always nodded when he said it, the way you nod at something that sounds wise. I did not actually understand it until I was standing on that path. Understanding a thing and living it are two different countries, and most of us never cross the border. Here's what I've come to. Sitting on this porch in Maine, every choice plants something. Brock chose a girlfriend in Stamford and a poker table in Manhattan, and what grew from those choices was a foreclosed house and a couch at his parents'. Hallie chose a Google Doc with her father's Social Security on line 3, and what grew from that was a kitchen island where her husband would not look her in the eye. I chose, on that path, not to walk away, to stay, to watch, to act, when the time came, with my eyes open instead of my heart bleeding. And what grew from that choice was this porch, and a grandson drawing lobster boats, and a daughter at AA on Thursday nights who looks me in the eye now. I don't believe in luck the way some people do. I believe in what you build, brick by brick, with every small decision nobody sees you make. The integrity to hear the truth, even when it's about the person you love most in the world. The wisdom to wait instead of swinging. The strength to keep going to dinners and reading bedtime stories and smiling at a son-in-law you'd already buried in your mind because the long game required it. If you take anything from an old man's story, take this. Don't confuse being loved with being needed. Don't confuse being needed with being used. The people who love you don't itemize you. They don't put you on line 3 of a document. They call on a Sunday with nothing to ask for, just to hear your voice. And they listen when you tell them the small, boring, true things about your day. And if you ever find yourself standing on a path, with a tricycle in your hand and a voice through a window saying something you can't unhear, don't run. Don't yell. Go quiet. Think. Plan. Act when you can act well, not when you feel like acting. That's not coldness. That's the only kind of love that has any chance of saving anyone, including yourself. I'm 63. I've got water out my window and a boy with a crayon at my feet. I'm a lucky old man. But the luck, I'm telling you, was built.